details. We're going to record this because it's July and I'm hoping a lot of district folks are on some much deserved vacation. So we're going to record it and then we're going to share it out with email, and then we're also going to post it on the website so that you can access this later. All right, without further ado, let's get started. We're going to cover a lot in this time together. I think based on previous webinars, this will take about 30 minutes, depending on how many questions you might have. We're going to cover eligibility and requirements of the grant. We'll talk about funding and fund use, what you can spend the money on. We'll go over similarities and differences between this year and previous years. There are a fair list of both. We're going to talk about what you need to do to submit the grant. And then once you've done that, what does the grant review process look like? And then we'll go over some next steps for you, and we'll take time at the end for questions. But like I said, please feel free to ask them at any point along the way. All right. Let's start with which districts are eligible for TAG funding. This is the same as in previous years. Any district that has one or more schools with any of the following on these 3 bullet points. So if you have one school in your district that has a federal designation of CSI, TSI, ATSI, that's comprehensive support and intervention, targeted support intervention, additional targeted support and intervention, all those alphabet soup of federal designation. If you have one of those, then yes, you're eligible for TAG. If you, for those of you that are interested in what that means, it means you're in either the bottom 5% of schools, or you have a student group that's in the bottom 5%. And if you've had that for 1 year, you're TSI. If you've had it for a couple years, ATSI, 3 years, CSI. The second one, if you're in the lowest 10 percentiles on our state accountability system. That's another trigger for being eligible for TAG. And then finally, if you have a school that's identified as underperforming, there's only 8 in the whole state, and they're captured under the first 2 bullets, but we do need to mention it just in case that's not the case in the future. That's who's going to be eligible. All the schools that were eligible from the 2023 accountability data, which is released in the fall each year, that's what we're using for this year, because we haven't got the 2024 data yet. Obviously, it's not September. So we're using last year's data to determine eligibility. Eventually, in the fall, the 2024 accountability will come out and we'll adjust who's eligible. We're not going to adjust down. Nobody's going to be losing funding this year. We will only adjust up. I'll go into more of that in detail later. Schools that are in the Strategic Transformation Office, that's our schools in Lawrence, Holyoke, Southbridge. Charter schools, virtual schools, they're not eligible for this. They have separate funding streams that capture something similar to what we're doing with you all. Okay, I'm going to start before we even read these bullet points. This is all the same as last year. So if you were participating last year, then you know that when you take TAG funds, that you're going to work with our office. And that might be an SSOS staff if you're one of those districts. Other districts are working with a different team, like my colleagues Emily Ullman and Andrea Ricotta. But you'll be working with somebody if you accept the grant funds. And then you're also going to provide what is your instructional priority. You're going to provide a plan to us of whatever it is that you are focusing on for this coming year. And then you'll also do progress monitoring. You all received these visits this past year. You'll continue to get them next year. So again, this is all the same as last year. All right, how much money are we talking? There's $4 million of TAG funds, and it's about 2/3 of it comes from the federal government and 1/3 comes from the state. You'll see the different fund codes. I'll go over the fund codes in a little bit. They don't really mean anything for your purposes, but just telling you where the money comes from. The part that is important on this page is all funds need to be expended by June 30th, 2025. This was actually the case for TAG for many years. Then the pandemic came and we were able to give more flexibility, and you could actually spend money in the summer. 11 of you took advantage of that this year. Now, as we're getting further and further removed from the pandemic, our grants office has told us that we need to go back to everyone needs to spend by June 30th. That's actually why we are rolling out this grant months earlier, so that you can have it for this summer if you want it. We're going to roll it out even earlier next year, so you could have it for even more of the summer. I'm going to pause there. Anything in the chat because I can't see it. Okay. Does anyone want to ask any questions? I'll pause for a few seconds. All right, moving on. All right, what's the same as last year? A lot of this is the same. TAG is intended to support district systems to support your schools. That's staying the same. The fundamental purpose of this grant is not changing. You'll notice in the actual application, it looks almost identical. 99% of the words are the same. We changed some years on it and a few things here and there, but that's by design. You're getting familiar with what the application looks like, so we don't want to change it unless we absolutely need to. You're going to see the application looks almost identical. And then the main focus here, what we're looking for is TAG funding aligned with what your district instructional priority is. We're looking for that kind of alignment. We did that last year, we're doing that again this year. That's the big thing we're looking for, is what you're proposing with the TAG funds. Is that aligned with what you said was your most important instructional priority this year? That's staying the same. There are some things that are different. One big one is this process is months earlier this year. Last year when we did this webinar, it was mid-September, and now we're in mid-July. So it's 2 months earlier, and the goal is to do this in June, early June next year. So we'll do it even earlier next year. So we are moving it earlier so that you have more time to spend the funds. Most of your allocations are going to be the same. 26 out of 31 are the same. Some were a little different because when we got the new data in 2023, you actually had improving schools. And so your list of eligible schools shrunk. And so that means, that the TAG allocation shrinks. A big difference, the end date for all districts is June 30th. This is, for most of you were spending it all by June 30th anyway. So this won't impact very many of you, but for those of you that move money into the summer, just know that that's no longer going to be an option. Submitting in GEMS, as an agency, we are getting rid of Ed grants. It served us somewhat well for the past decade. I have a mixed relationship with it. Sometimes I appreciate it, sometimes not so much. GEMS is taking a lot of the things that were rough around the edges with Ed grants and improving it. There are so many things that is better. I personally am still in the learning phases of GEMS, and so I have some frustrating moments with it, but I can already see that it is actually going to make things better for all of us. One of those things is no signed cover page, which was just a pain for lots of you to have to send that to us. You don't need to do that anymore. GEMS is far more advanced, and we don't need you to actually put a pen on a piece of paper and scan it and email it to us. So that's going to be different. Okay, allocation update. When the 2024 accountability figures are released, they're typically released in September. We will add any eligible schools. If you have districts that were above, say, the 10th percentile and they dropped below in this 2024 data, we'll add that to your district's total. If you have schools that are no longer eligible, which I hope you do, because your schools are improving, we're not deducting anything from the district total for the year. We only add to it. We'll make those adjustments for the 25-26 grant next year. So if the number of newly eligible schools increases significantly, then you actually may get an increase in your TAG application. No one's going to get a decrease, but if you do have a significant number of schools added, last year it was 4, we increased the allocations for 4 districts who had a lot of newly eligible schools. That's still going to be the case this year. Okay, we did get some feedback that we needed to talk about what specific fund uses can we do for this. So we came up with an example, and this is similar to what we did last year. Let's say your district wants to focus on strengthening Tier 1 math instruction. That's what your instructional priority is for this year. Then what TAG could support are actually a handful of different things. It could support sending your teachers or other staff members to a professional development. And if it's on their own time, you could use it to pay them the stipends that you would need to pay them. If it's going to be during the school day, you could use it to pay for substitutes to cover those teachers' classes. Another one you could use is if you're bringing the PD to you, you can pay the contractor, you can pay a vendor to come to your school or district and provide whatever professional development you've selected. And then sometimes when you have professional development, there are material supplies that are needed. One example is some PD will ask you to buy a book. And if you're giving that to, say, 75 staff members, you need to buy 75 books. That can add up. You can use TAG to pay for those kinds of supplies. So that would be an example of what TAG could support funding wise. I've said this before, and I'm going to repeat it again because it's central to this whole grant. It needs to be aligned to what your district's priority is. That's going to be the number one thing that the review team's looking for when you submit an application. If you said strengthening tier 1 math instruction, then what we want to see with TAG expenses is that everything is aligned to improving tier 1 math instruction. If you're talking about a science coach with your TAG funds, it's going to be, it's going to be a revision. We're going to ask you to make some changes. So make sure it aligns with whatever priority that your district selected. And the fund use recommendations, they're aligned with EdVision. You probably heard that. It's our guiding document here at DESE, the CSDP Coherence Guidebook that a lot of my colleagues spent a long time creating. TAG is aligned with both of those, and you'll see that throughout. I did want to highlight this third bullet here. Within those priorities, there are actually flexibilities in how you can spend TAG funds. If it's aligned, like if you are strengthening tier 1 math instruction and those are what you want to spend TAG funds on, you're actually going to have a fair amount of flexibility in how you spend it. Like once you've hit that alignment piece, then there's a lot of different ways. I showed you on the previous slide. There's a lot of different ways you can spend TAG funds. The first and foremost, it needs to be aligned with the instructional priority. All right, I'm going to quick pause. Anything in the chat?
Nothing.
All right. Okay, application deadline. This is due Monday, September 30th. You might be asking, that is a long time from now. That's more than 2.5 months from now. Here's the reason why. We wanted to roll out the grant earlier because some of you may want the money for the summer because it's no longer going to be allowed to use it in the summer after the year. So we wanted to give you the opportunity. If you needed it in July and August, you can apply in July and then have the funds. But some of you don't need it in the summer. And some of you, actually a lot of you, end up writing the application after the school year started. So we still wanted to make that an option. We didn't want to make the due date, in August. So that's why it's going to be at the end of September. So you have a long window in which to submit this year, much longer than usual. And that's by design. We do encourage you to submit as soon as you can, because that's when you can start spending the money. So it gives you more flexibility if you apply in, say, July than at September 29th. So you can actually have the funds for months longer. So just keep that in mind. You can actually start spending the money from when you submit the grant. So we encourage you to submit as soon as you can, because then that'll give you more time to have the money. All right, what gets submitted? There's going to be 3 things that get submitted. This one's the easiest one. The first section is going to be contact info. This is where you're going to list at least 2 people. Make sure it's at least 2 because sometimes people change jobs or are on extended leave. We want to make sure that we can reach you. So make sure you list 2 people and put their email addresses. A few have submitted already their applications and they did not put their email addresses. This is how we're going to communicate with you throughout the year. So if you maybe are one of those districts that has an increase in their allocation this year, that's how we're going to tell you. So if we have your email address, it's much easier to communicate this information with you. So make sure you put in 2 names or more and email addresses. That's section 1. Section 2 is the budget. And it looks like this. It looks similar to Ed Grants for those of you that did this in the other system. It's not identical. You'll notice like stipends is not its own category anymore. It's tucked in under professional salaries. But for the most part, it's similar. And you'll just click on like if you wanted to do contracted services, you just click on 4C contracted services, and then you'll type in, you'll fill out the budget that way. It's pretty straightforward and user-friendly. And then the last thing you do is the narrative. And you'll see the narrative here. If you did this last year, like, oh, this looks almost identical. It is almost identical. This is going to be the meat of what you're proposing. This is where you're writing out in words. That's why it's a narrative on what you're using the funds on. And then you'll make sure you'll notice that second column there is connecting to the district priority. That's the important one. So make sure that you are connecting with whatever your expenses are to how it aligns with your instructional priority for the district. So those are the 3 sections that you're going to submit in GEMS, and you can see what they look like. Once you've done that, then now it's on, the ball's in our court. So now we need to start reviewing it. So we have a DESI review team that's assigned to all 31 of you, and we're going to review those submissions. We're looking for 3 big things when you submit. First, foremost, and you sound like a broken record, but it's for a reason. It needs to align with your instructional priority. That's first and foremost what we're looking for. We'll also look for technical requirements like the one I reviewed today, took too much indirect costs. So we're looking for little nitty-gritty things like that. And then the third one is, are the expenses reasonable and allowable? So you could have an instance where, yeah, it's aligned to the district instructional priority, but it's like reasonable would be, let's say 90% of your tag allocation is going towards supplies. That wouldn't constitute reasonable. So we're looking for that. Allowable might be if you decided you wanted to give stipends to a principal or an assistant superintendent. That's obviously a no-no. So we're looking to make sure that what you're proposing is reasonable and allowable. All right, we good on chat questions? All right. Okay. This is something new because it's in GEMS, and I want to make you aware of it because I think sometimes districts get through step 2 here and then they think their part's done. And I think it's causing some confusion. So I wanted to lay it out here. First one, you submit to us, fine. And it'll say LEA fiscal representative. You send that to us, then we review it and we'll maybe go back and forth with you. Maybe it's approvable in the first submission, but we'll do our part. And then once we've got it to an approvable place, we send it back to you and it'll say DESI program reviewed. It'll feel like you're done, but there's actually one more step that you need to do. The superintendent has to approve it. So they will send it back to us once they've clicked. It really is just a matter of clicking a button. They'll click on LEA superintendent approved. So you actually have one more step after we approve it. The superintendent sends it back to us. When I looked at this, a few months ago when we first saw it, I was like, why are we doing it this way? Why can't they just submit it to us and then be done? The thinking is, if we did have to make a lot of revisions, we don't want you to have to go to your superintendent twice. So they might approve this version and we make a whole bunch of changes, then you have to go ask the superintendent again to approve it because now it's so fundamentally different. We're trying to avoid the superintendent having to look at this grant more than necessary. So we wait till it's done, it's polished, it's finished, then you give it to your superintendent and then she or he approves it by clicking that button and sends it back to us. And then once you send it back to us, it's just a perfunctory part at the end where we just click approved because we've already approved it by this point. So there's twice that you send it to us. You send it to us, we approve it. You send it back to us with the superintendent saying, yes, I agree, I approve. And then we click the last button and then it moves on to the fiscal people who make sure you get money in your account. I'm going to pause there because we have had a few districts submit already, and this is a point that's hanging up a few of them. Any questions on that? You feel free to come off mute or type it in the chat. I'll pause for a few seconds. Nothing in the chat. Okay, we'll keep moving on. Pulled some frequently asked questions just to go over them real quick. What's the difference? Sometimes my grant's 222, sometimes it's 325. It really doesn't mean anything for your purposes. Like I mentioned, we have 2 different funding streams, state and federal, that are supporting this. All that's doing is telling the DESI people that manage the money which account to pull from. It's all the same for your purposes, same due date, same spending requirements, same everything. So it really doesn't matter. So don't think anything differently if we switched you from 222 to 325. It's just trying to make the numbers work. Okay, what if the 2024 data, which is coming out in September-ish, shows that we have fewer tag eligible schools? Will our allocation be reduced? No, it will not. The allocation that you have now, that's your floor. It will be at least that. It may go up, but it's definitely not going to go down. We'll do all that, calculate if you have a bunch fewer schools, which is actually a good thing. That means your schools are improving. We will adjust it for next year's grant 25-26 grant, but that's not going to impact this year's grant. If your school is eligible today, it's going to be eligible for the rest of the year. Oh, and then just real quick, just wanted to make it clear, most of you are it's going to be the same all year. A few of you last year 4 went up, and then obviously 0 will go down. Okay, what if the 2024 data shows that we have more tag eligible schools? Will our allocation be increased? Maybe. It might be if the number of newly eligible schools increases significantly, then it would probably go up. The reason why we can't say yes here is because what we have is a fixed amount of money. We're holding aside, I'll tell you, $700,000 for schools that are increasing. Do you want me to check the chat?
Do you want me to tell you what you
Oh, let me go through this and then okay, so the reason why we can't tell you yes is because we don't know how many new schools are going to be identified. If that number is bigger, then we're not going to be able to offer as much of an increase to districts. And if it's just a few schools that are newly eligible, then yeah, then you probably will get an increase. But since we don't know that, but we do have a fixed amount of money to offer, that's why we can't say, yes, you will, because we just don't know. There's that unknown variable of how many new schools. Okay, chat question?
So Cheryl Rabbit has a question in the chat on the timeline. The submission is September 30th.
Yes.
And funds are allocated or expended by June 30th, 2025, and can be used for summer work. So how do districts account for the summer work in July and August 2025, since it's technically FY26?
Okay, great question, Cheryl. In case you didn't hear Moira's voice, she's asking about how will summer spending work, because you can't spend this year's grant in summer of 2025. That's why we're trying to roll out the grant earlier, and this year's going to be a little awkward because you were able to spend it in the summer for the 23-24 grant, but not for next year's grant. So if you need the money this summer, then we encourage you to apply like as soon as you can, and then you can actually have the money from when you apply, so you could have it for most of July and August. If you have plans for, say, July of 2025, that's actually going to be next year's grant, and we're going to roll next year's grant out even earlier than we did this year. And so you would apply for that in, say, June of 2025, you'll get that year's grant, and then you can use that for summer. So this is our transition year. In the past, you've been able to use TAG for the summer after your school year, but because these rules have changed, this is for all grants, not just for ours. Because the rules have changed, we're shifting to you're going to use your grant for the summer before the school year. This is our awkward year, and then moving forward, you'll have funds for the summer preceding the school year. Great question, Cheryl. Any other questions? All right. So next steps. If I were in your position, I'd like knowing, like, right, there's a lot of information. What should I do next? I would recommend consulting with your SSOS team if that applies to you, or another CSDP team, because we have others that are working like with my colleagues Emily and Andrea. Talk with them. A lot of them have helped with many TAG applications and are a great resource, thought partner. Reach out to them. They're quite valuable. Second one, as you develop your application, make sure it aligns with the district instructional priority. That's such a no-brainer. We're going to have to ask you for revisions if it doesn't. So just make sure that it's aligned. All your expenses are going to be aligned to that priority. And then once you're there, submit the application in GEMS. And the sooner you can submit, the sooner you'll have your money. Even if we need to amend it later, like if you're not quite sure, you're like, I need to wait a few weeks before I can figure out this expense, I would recommend not. Just make your submission your best estimate, and you can always amend it later. But we can't, if you wait months to submit, you've lost those months where you could potentially use the grant to pay for things. So that's why we'd love it if you submit as early as possible. And just know you can always amend later. The expectation is not that you have the entire year figured out exactly right when you submit. If it helps, almost everybody submits at least one amendment each year. Some do 3 or 4. All right, if you do have questions about TAG, Substantive questions, reach out to your SSOS team, reach out to the CSDP team if that's who applies to you. They're a great resource and they can talk you through this. You're also welcome to reach out to me too if you need to. Technical questions about completing anything in GEMS, I am far from an expert, but I have muddled through significantly in GEMS this past year. And even if I can't help you, I can muddle through it with you and maybe we can figure it out. Moira and I have spent lots of time on GEMS trying to figure it out. Some of you are having questions about progress monitoring. There were some big changes this past year, and there'll be tweaks for the coming year, but it will look a lot more similar than the big transition you experienced last year. If you have questions about progress monitoring, my supervisor, Erica Champagne, she's the lead on that, and she can answer anything that you might have progress monitoring related. All right, and the link to the RFP, that's on our website, and that has everything. That has everything you need. It has the narrative form, it has who is eligible, your allocation if you don't remember it, anything that you might need related to the grant. I'm going to send this PowerPoint out so you could actually click on that link. If you didn't want to wait, I pasted the link there. If you wanted to copy it down real quick, and you can get all the information that you need off of that.
It's also in the chat.
Oh. Told you my colleague is a rock star. Thank you, Moira. That is way better than copying down that giant URL. Look in the chat and click on the RFP link. Okay, that is way more talking than I like to do. I thought it'd take 30 minutes. It took 28 minutes. That was pretty close on the estimate. I'm going to pause here, and if you have questions, great. If you don't, feel free to sign off and go enjoy this steamy day outside. But I'll stick on for a few minutes and take any questions you might have. Otherwise, thank you. I appreciate you taking the time, and we'll talk soon.
Need to stop recording.
Yes, let's stop recording.